Please note that the content of this episode has explicit language and is not suitable for underage listeners.
I'm CJ, and I've done phone sex for 24 years. Let's get started. First off, I wanted to say, if you're listening on YouTube, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notified when a new podcast is dropped. I drop one every Monday. So, this has been another interesting week. It seems as though some of my longtime callers have wanted to chat. Now, usually when someone wants to chat, they are in the same room or same house as their significant other or somebody's there. So chatting is, like I've mentioned before, for those of you who have listened, is like instant messaging. It used to bother me when someone wanted to chat because it's easier to talk on the phone than sit at my computer and write. And I don't like using the platform on my phone. It's too small. You know, I'm that age. I'm not young and, zippy. So I have to sit at my computer. And they write me and I write them, and it's back and forth. It's like instant messaging, like I said. The good news is that when they write me and I write them back, that's a volley. So for every volley, I get paid. So it can add up if someone's writing you and you're writing them back and forth and back and forth. And there have been times, like the last few days, where I've made a lot of money, a lot more money than I have with phone calls. So sometimes chat is good. And when you do get a call and you're chatting, they can see that you're on a call, so some people stop writing and some people like it and they write more. And they like that you're ignoring them because you are busy getting someone off. At least that's what they think. This week has been a lot more writing than talking on the phone. People have asked me, well, what do they write about? When they write you. Sometimes it's just hello and that's it. And sometimes it's more. It's almost like talking on the phone. The same thing. I have a caller who likes to be told he's a naughty boy. And when we talk about naughty things like me getting him hard, it's basically sexting. Now, I have a couple people who ask me to ask them to tip me. Some people automatically tip and you don't have to tell them. In this particular case, these guys want me to tell them to tip me. And in some cases, I have to tell them how much. There's a couple ways that they can tip. I just tell them to tip me, which is kind of weird because when you tip someone, it's because they're doing a good job, not because they're telling you to, right? There's another thing where I have to send them a message, and in order to read my message, they have to tip me. So I start out low because I don't want to start out high, right? If I started out high, it would be like, you just want the money. So I start out low so that they can ease into the tipping thing. I'd prefer somebody tip on their own and not ask me to ask them for money, but some guys get off on that. They really do. It's kind of like the blackmail dudes. So I start out low. Some people will say, well, that's not enough. Some people will say more. So you kind of get the idea of how this works. Now, I've never understood how it could be exciting to tip a phone sex operator, but for them, it is exciting. And certainly I will not question them on that. I start out maybe with $2 because don't forget, I don't get all the money. So if I ask them to tip $2, they're paying $2. I get $1.70, which is quite okay. It adds up. So it's kind of cool. When I talk to them and say, hey, I hope we could talk soon, there isn't usually a commitment. So for example, if you take the number 10 and say, well, they chat with me 10 times out of those 10 times, maybe one time will be a phone call. So there's a way more chatting going on than there is phone calling with these particular guys. And I've gotten them off and we've had great conversations, but it's so few and far between. It's better than nothing doing this chatting thing and asking them to tip me. There are days where I've made hundreds of dollars just chatting, and I certainly am not going to turn that down. I'll take the money however I can get it. When I am home and I don't feel like working, I could just go on but not log in. They could see that I'm there. And then sometimes they just chat with me and I don't have to log in to take phone calls. So it's an alternate way to make money and it's kind of cool. I heard that one of the platforms has a new rule that they are not allowed to hypnotize, quote unquote, hypnotize. The girls are not allowed to hypnotize people. It's kind of funny because someone did ask me once if I could hypnotize them. And I really didn't know how to do that. I kind of faked it and said, stare into my eyes. But I think that it's a specific, unique fetish So these girls need to change their profiles. And if they've been faking it or doing it for a really long time, it kind of stinks that they have to change what their niche is, because you get into a groove and now they have to stop. It's not allowed anymore. So that's going to put a kink into their model. I got a call this week from someone who said that I didn't sound messed up enough and I sounded way too real. I wanted to know what that meant. I think I knew, but I didn't want to assume. So he said to me, well, don't you think that all the guys that call you, including me, are messed up? And all the girls that do this have issues? I said, well, I can only speak for myself, and that is I come from a very good home that had no problems, no issues, no molestation, no abuse, no drugs, no nothing. So you can't use me as an example. I've heard from several men that the girls have had issues with their families or boyfriends or whatever. And so them being messed up is the reason why they're doing what they're doing. And I said, well, I have a day job and this is just a second job because I want it to supplement my original job. I'm not messed up. I haven't had boyfriends beat me or, like I said, drugs or family with problems, whatever the case may be. I certainly don't want to judge the girls that do this because I know my story. Now, on the flip side, like I said, the guys that call me, no, I don't think they're all cheaters, losers, or they're bad men. I think that all sorts of people call for all sorts of reasons, like I've said before. And I recently had another conversation which keeps coming up about, is phone sex cheating? Between the cheating question and are the girls and guys messed up? At the end of the day, I don't think it matters. It's not up to me about the whole cheating thing. The thing about cheating is if it's emotional, if there's an emotional component, it could be cheating if there is talk of meeting, and that goes into a whole different thing. I don't think it's cheating if a guy's just calling and has no intention of meeting anyone and the girl doesn't want to meet either. So that's a whole, different thing. Back to are the girls messed up? Are the guys messed up? There are all types of people out there. There's all types of reasons why people do this from my end, call from the caller's end. And we are not here to try to figure out what that is. And someone said, no, I'm not being judgy. I'm just wondering what, if all the girls are messed up and the guys are fucked up. And I'm like, no, I don't see it that way. It's not black and white. It's everybody's story is different. My first or second podcast and somewhere in between, I've said people call because they're lonely, right? People call because they have no one to talk to and they want to have a sexy voice or a pretty girl, or they're tired of the people that they talk to every day, their kids, their wives, their whatever the case may be. Who cares, right? Who cares if the guys are messed up? Who cares if the girls are messed up? As long as the caller, the customer, is getting what they want, that's all that matters to me. I want to please my customer. I don't care about their backstory. They don't have to tell me anything. They don't have to tell me if they're married, what they look like. I had a caller the other day say, do you want to know what I look like? It's kind of insulting to say no, and I understand that, but it isn't mandatory. I don't care. If you want to tell me, great. Otherwise, it matters very little to me. I don't have one of those brains that I can imagine what you look like if you tell me you're 6'2" with brown eyes and brown hair. It doesn't matter to me. The guys, it matters to them what I look like, of course, but I don't care what they look like. I had a caller who said to me, I've called other phone sex girls and they've said that I'm their favorite. Well, that's nice. I told him that's nice, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be real. Now, how real should I be, right? Oh, you are my favorite. You're my favorite. This was a new caller, so I didn't know if he was going to be my favorite or not. I do have favorites. Of course I do. But it's all about how long I've spoken to them. They call, we talk, I tell them, I just internalize who my favorites are. There are those that are not my favorites, and I certainly wouldn't tell some of my regulars that they're not my favorites and to stop calling. I would never say that. I would never tell someone that to stop calling me because I don't want to talk to them and I don't want to do that fantasy the 18,000th time. But I think it's human nature to have your favorites. I'm not going to lie to my callers in that sense and say, I love you or I don't love you or you're my favorite. You're not. This guy, when I told him I wasn't going to lie to him, I think he was a little disappointed. I told him I want to sound as genuine and as real as possible. And I think I do a pretty good job at that. I don't think he's going to call me back. I think he was a little butthurt, and that's okay. He can be butthurt all he wants. I just don't want to lie. I lie enough as it is. And about that, I don't want to lie. I do have a caller that I really do enjoy. He doesn't call very often. As a matter of fact, I think he calls like every 3 months or 4 months. And I love talking to him. I think I've told you he wears me out, but I love it. And I love his voice. It's just amazing. But I don't tell him he's my favorite. I just say I look forward to talking to you. There are ways to say things that make them feel good other than saying you're my favorite. That doesn't sound genuine to me at all. Somebody recently asked me, how do I wind down and turn it off? And that question was based on the political call that I spoke about last week, when somebody screams as loudly as they did and used, the profanities that he did. They wanted to know, how do I wind down? And what I did that day, and have done on other calls, which there have been very few that have rattled me. I don't typically get rattled or upset or anything. I just hang up the phone and watch TV and move on. But in this particular case, what I did was what I would do if I had more calls like this. So I have this guy, he hung up, and I sat here talking to myself, really saying what was bothering me. And like I said in the podcast previously, what bothered me was not what he said. You can call me anything. I've been called like a lot of nasty things. You've heard, he called me a stupid fucking cunt. Like I said before, that does not bother me. It's the anger that came with it. So what I did was I thought about it for a second. And I went, no, it's not the words. It was the anger. And I just started to breathe and thought, it's very upsetting that somebody would call and be that emotional and that upset. And it probably took me 10 minutes, which isn't very long in the scheme of things, to get over it. However, I was feeling kind of nervous because I'm not used to people screaming. I didn't grow up with screamers. I've never gotten into a screaming match. I kind of shut down. So I shut down, and fortunately enough, it was the last call of the night, because if it wasn't, then I probably would have logged off for maybe 20, 30 minutes just to compose myself. Then I would have logged back on. So I said to them that I typically don't get upset. I don't get rattled at all, because really people call, like I say, for all sorts of reasons. And one of the reasons is for people to listen to them, whatever it is that they have to say, and rant and scream. And it includes, calling a phone sex operator names because she doesn't think the way he does. So it's a good question. Like I just said a minute ago, I didn't grow up in a household or around people that screamed. So even in movies, when it gets very contentious, it bothers me because that isn't how I was raised to communicate. And so when it happens to me, when someone yells at me, which happens very little, that way, then, oh boy, it really does rattle me. And like I said, I have gotten callous to the C word. It has no weight for me. I don't care. It's just another word. So anyway, that is the answer to that question. I just sit and breathe and wait. That's the best thing I can do. And talk to myself. I really do talk to myself a lot. And I answer myself too. So that's really good. No answers in my head. I really do. I did get another question. It was, how do you get energized, or how do you keep your interest on a long call? That's a really good question. So if there is a lot of conversation or engagement, then I will certainly be interested, or seem to be interested. The problem is one of two things. This week I had a call where the guy just wouldn't stop talking. And I've said that before. I didn't really need to say much of anything. So I was laying down, as I do, and was kind of nodding off, to be honest, because I wasn't engaged and he didn't really need me there, period. Now, if it was a long call and he was asking me questions, or he wanted to hear me groan and moan and groan, then that's one thing. Now, with regular callers, he asked me about that. How do I stay interested? The problem with that is I'm not. So like I've told you, I have a guy who calls with the same exact role play. I have a few people who call with the same exact role play, and it does get boring, and I'm very uninterested. And at that point, how do I keep my interest? I hate to say it. It's about the money, because it can't be about anything else. Their calls, their topics are not interesting at all. They were interesting the first 20 times, the first 30 times. But now it's not challenging at all. It's challenging to answer the phone enthusiastically, knowing that I will be saying almost the same thing as I did the time before. And I have to remember what I've said before, kind of, so I can change it up and sound a little different. I just want to fall asleep, or I want to ask them if they have any other role plays or fantasies, but I don't want them to think I'm bored. I answer the phone with one guy and I go, hey, and then I say what I say, and I'm waiting for him to say, I want to do something different, but he doesn't. And so we just keep going. I leave it up to them. So sometimes it's hard to stay enthusiastic and energized, and other times it's not. And if they're doing all the talking, I have found myself dozing. I did this week, but at least I caught myself. I would hate for them to catch me. It's a little embarrassing. I start to hear myself breathe heavier because I'm sleeping, and then they go, hey, you know? So no sleeping on the job. They can fall asleep on me. I can't fall asleep on them. I have to continue to sound enthusiastic and excited about the same role play I've done. One guy says, do you mind if we do the same role play? And I'm going to say, of course I don't mind. Because if I do mind, guess what? He's going to find somebody else. And that's not going to be good. I don't want them to find anybody else. I want them to talk to me. There you go. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your interest. I want to thank you again for listening to Secrets from a Phone Sex Queen, everything you always wanted to know about phone sex and more. Please reach out to me with your questions and comments. I do love them at phonesexqueen1@gmail.com. New episodes drop every Monday. Check me out on Facebook at CJ's Podcast and Instagram at PhoneQueen1. I have not gotten my TikTok back yet. If you're listening on YouTube, again, please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified when a new podcast is dropped. Until next time, stay sexy.